you have some youth that just, no matter what happens, it seems like they're just going to commit crime. There's nothing that can be done.
For days, Nashville's Juvenile Crime Task Force scoured the streets of Nashville looking for a violent repeat offender.
It's horrible to think that way and say, and it's not a lot of them, but there's a handful that just are that will flat out tell you there's nothing gonna happen good if they're free on the streets.
16-year-old Deontay Gooch Blacksmith was supposed to be under the supervision of the State Department of Children's Services, but DCS had lost him.
We were afraid there would be another robbery or someone being injured in the commission of robbery or auto theft, something along those lines. So it was a very high priority to get him back again into the system before any one of our community members got hurt.
You're gonna get caught, get out the car!
This was Deontay Gooch Blacksmith caught on camera stealing a car back in 2017. Our investigation discovered that Gooch Blacksmith was just 13 when he was arrested for that auto theft. He was placed in DCS custody, but his record continued. At 15, aggravated robbery. He was ordered to remain under DCS supervision. Earlier this year, a theft charge out of Sumner County. He was put on DCS probation until 2020. In June, now age 16, arrested for aggravated robbery, accused of jumping into a woman's car with a handgun and robbing her. But DCS did not revoke his probation. In August, especially aggravated robbery, charged this time with shooting a man in the stomach at a truck stop off Trinity Lane during an attempted robbery. DCS put him on an ankle monitor while he awaited trial, but then Gooch Blacksmith stopped charging it and disappeared. Police worried what he might do next.
It really places our community members in danger. And that, to us, is something we have, no tolerance for, because it's literally life and death.
The 16-year-old was eventually taken into custody after officers spotted him driving a stolen car. Police say he refused to stop, forcing them to eventually deploy spike strips to deflate the car's tires.
A lot can go wrong with that, so that's the last thing we ever want to do, but we had to get involved with it because we had to remove him off of the streets before a community member got hurt.
A week earlier, members of the task force arrested 17-year-old Reginald Williams Jr., another juvenile who was supposed to be supervised by the state. Williams was actually still wearing a working DCS ankle monitor when police say he went on a violent late-night crime spree that included the shooting and wounding of a female Lyft driver and the sexual assault of a second driver. 2 years earlier, Williams had been implicated in the armed robbery of a cab driver. But police say when his ankle monitor showed he was again out on the town, DCS never alerted them, potentially giving them a chance to interrupt his violent rampage.
This is past curfew, obviously, and there's no one reaching out to us telling us that, hey, this youth is out past their curfew. They're not in zones or areas where they're supposed to be.
And police say DCS also never told them that Jeroy Green III had let his ankle monitor go dead for several weeks. Investigators discovered it themselves when Green became a suspect in the September 28th murder of 18-year-old Samuel Jordan Calvert.
I needed someone to understand that we needed to urgently deal with this.
Homicide Detective Jesse Holt says even when he told a DCS supervisor that Green was a suspect, she was in no hurry to ask that he be arrested for going off the radar.
Finding out that it had already been uncharged for so long was disturbing. Finding out that it was uncharged the day of the homicide, disturbing. And then to continuously have to kind of urge them along to get this corrected was more than disturbing.
Is it possible that Samuel Calvert would still be alive today if DCS had done its job?
I think that the lack of continuous accountability that Jeroy Green probably felt emboldened him to be where he was.
If he says it was disturbing to him, I know it was.
DCS Commissioner Jennifer Nichols says she gets why when Green disappeared, the detective thought the DCS caseworker should have acted more urgently.
And that seems so common sense to him as a police officer, and perhaps to you as an investigative reporter who has covered so many of these things. It seems logical to me as a career prosecutor.
But it didn't seem logical to the caseworker?
I want you to think about the caseworkers. They're not law enforcement. They're not prosecutors.
They do not sound the alarm, and they don't respond with a sense of urgency typically. as we would hear.
Juvenile Court Administrator Kathy Simback also noted that Davidson County's own juvenile probation officers routinely ride with the task force,
16, 15.
making unannounced visits to search the rooms of high-risk offenders who are on probation, something that DCS doesn't do with even more dangerous offenders.
Our local level offenders are getting these checks by the probation officers, by us at the police department.
And they're not as dangerous.
And they're generally not as considered at the threat level that the children in the Department of Children's Services supervision are.
And they're
not receiving these types of checks. They're not expecting to receive a knock at the door and have that Department of Children's Services officer be there with the Metro Police Department. That's not happening.
That's crazy.
I absolutely think so. I think that's a big missing piece. You have to have the accountability.
Nichols Stauff recently told News Channel 5 Investigates that such unannounced home visits are just too difficult.
Unannounced home visits are fine, but we should know they're not there by monitor alerts.
But if you do an unannounced home visit, you may find the kid has a gun.
Okay, so if you go in and search the house, I see what you're saying.
It's not unusual for those probation officers to recover firearms, ammunition, firearm magazines, high quantities of narcotics, and loads of keys to stolen vehicles.
Because he's on supervised probation, we do room searches, so it'll just be his room, his belongings. Okay. Yeah, is that okay?
We had one recently where we found just a single bullet in that room. And now that child is still at home with increased supervision, didn't find a gun, but we think that child is hanging out with people who have guns, and we think there's a really high risk that that child is going to end up with a gun. So we are completely on top of that case. DCS would never find that little bullet. They wouldn't know that this is a child that you need to watch day and night.
It's a way to keep the child on the straight and narrow.
Absolutely.
I am open 100% to considering those.
While we were investigating, Commissioner Nichols, who took over the department this year, asked for the money to keep serious offenders on ankle monitors for 90 days after they are released from a facility instead of the current 30 days. And caseworkers were directed to alert police if a juvenile goes off the radar or if the electronic monitors show he or she is somewhere they shouldn't be.
The policy for DCS now is that if a monitor goes dead, or if a youth is out after curfew, a couple of phone calls are made. You call the caregiver, you call the parent. If they're supposed to be in school and they're not in school, you call the school. If you can't put your hands on the child immediately, then you call law enforcement.
Why wasn't that always the policy?
I can only answer what the policy's been since I've been here.
Metro Police said DCS is notifying them of having lost track of Deontay Gooch Blacksmith shows that things may be changing because they never got such notifications before.
I wish you'd come back a year from now. And I don't think that the department will be the same department.
We've done several checks tonight on youth.
All changes that the head of the task force says seem directly related to the questions being asked by News Channel 5 Investigates.
I would absolutely say that your knocking on someone's door or your questions have opened the minds at that agency to implementing new things and things that is going to make a difference in our communities.